Australian Colonisation, Indigenous Rights and the Reconciliation Process. In 1770, Lieutenant James Cook took possession of Australia's east coast for the British Crown, naming it New South Wales. In 1788, British colonisation began in Sydney. However, within weeks of the colonists' arrival, the Indigenous population was overwhelmed by a wave of European diseases. Aboriginal communities with the greatest population densities were the worst affected. The population decline was less obvious in the dry centre of the country, where small communities were spread over a large area. Another consequence of British settlement was the appropriation of land and water resources. The settlers believed that Indigenous people were nomads, with no understanding of land ownership, who could be driven off land wanted for farming or grazing. No treaty was ever signed with the Indigenous people to allow European land ownership. The loss of land, food and water sources were usually fatal, particularly to communities already weakened by disease. Aborigines have a deep spiritual and cultural connection to the land. Consequently, being forced to move from traditional areas meant cultural and spiritual practices could not be maintained, which were necessary to the unity and well-being of the group. The combination of disease, loss of land and direct violence reduced the Aboriginal population by an estimated 90% between 1788 and 1900. Entire communities in the southern part of the country simply vanished. Between 1910 and 1970, the Australian government forcibly removed Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families to assimilate them into European families. They were known as the Stolen Generations. They were forbidden from speaking their own languages and using their given names. Abuse and neglect were common. The continuation of deep cultural knowledge between generations was disrupted. The long-term effects on Indigenous people were devastating, including post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety and depression. Over time, the appropriation of prime land and the spread of European livestock over large areas made a traditional lifestyle less viable. With a few exceptions, Aborigines became more dependent on the settlers for their livelihood. Nevertheless, some Indigenous communities in the driest areas survived with their lifestyles intact as late as the 1930s. By the early 20th century, the Indigenous population had declined to between 50,000 and 90,000. By the 1930s, Indigenous Australians had developed better resistance to European diseases. Birth rates began to rise again as Aboriginal communities adapted. However, the 1900 Federal Constitution stated Indigenous people would not be counted in any census. Aboriginals were also not considered citizens of Australia or allowed to vote until 1967. Aborigines in Northern Territory were considered wards of the state. In the 1950s, the Jindiwarrabek movement increased interest in Aboriginal culture, particularly in righting the wrongs of the past. However, in one recent poll, over a third of Indigenous people aged 15 and over felt they had been treated unfairly at least once in the previous 12 months. Up to 4 out of 5 had regularly experienced racism. Ad campaigns were created to highlight the consequences of racism on mental health. It was not until 2008 that Prime Minister Kevin Rudd made a formal apology to Australia's Indigenous people. Every 26th of January, Australia Day is celebrated as the national holiday. It commemorates the first European arrival. To others, it is known as Invasion Day. In 1938, 100 Aborigines gathered to mark a day of mourning. In 1988, more than 40,000 Australians marched together in Sydney to acknowledge Survival Day. In 2016, New South Wales announced a compensation package of $73 million for Stolen Generation survivors. National Sorry Day has been held every year since 1998 on 26th of May as part of an ongoing reconciliation process.